don't we explore this? And of course, then you can kind of feel the pressure in the background of like, how will that be received? And of course, we don't want to be rejected by people that we love, but we also don't want to put ourselves in a small box to make everybody else feel good about who we are, what we think. And so I think it's, it's kind of that tangled web of becoming comfortable with who you are and trusting that the people who love you will continue to love you, whether they agree or disagree with what you put out in your art. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go to college.
Perfect.
Where did you go to college?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Northwestern in St. Paul, Minnesota. So not the Big Ten school. Some people, go there because it's what they've heard of. But
small town.
It was
a small town.
Yeah, it's a small town school. It was a liberal arts Christian college, and I had an amazing experience there. Really loved it. I actually majored in criminal justice.
Wow.
Which, yes, I know. I was a correctional officer for a year, and then I did juvenile correctionals for about 6 months. So, yeah, that's if you ever need a good story, check out prison.
Mm-hmm.
But I changed my major a few times. Like I went in thinking I was going to be a ministry major, and then I was just like, I can feel that this is not for me. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. And then I was like, so I'll do psychology. And then I was like, here's how I'm going to pick my major. I sat down with the course book, back in the day, they still printed them. I don't know. You probably just look online now, but I sat down with the course book and I just read it front to back. Right? It has every single course listed in there. I read it front to back and I just highlighted every course that felt like it appealed to me. Like, I would take that. I would take this. So I did that. And then I went back and just compiled like where do these courses belong? And it was like, most of these courses are in criminal justice. And I would have never chosen that as a major. But, it's like sociology, deviance, delinquency, like all of this stuff. And it was so compelling to me. And it felt criminal justice is technically under the psychology department. So it felt like if I want to do social work, if I want to do counseling, psychology, go on with my master's, this is in the right genre.
Mm-hmm.
I was potentially interested in law school. So again, like criminal justice would let me route that way down the road if I wanted to. And I think what I found so compelling about it is because, most of the core classes are all about like people and the way people work and the way systems work. And I love that. My deviance class was probably my favorite class of all time.
Deviance?
And yeah, deviance, right? Like, and even the whole question of like, what is deviant and how do we as a society or groups of people determine that a behavior will fall into the realm of deviance. And kind of our culminating project for that class was to choose an issue that you feel very strongly about. Like, this could be a hill to die on. You know all the answers. You are like just fundamentally secure. And it could be anything. Just something you know that you know that you know. And then you had to create a compelling presentation and argue for the other side. And I love stuff like that. And the professor was very much like, it doesn't work unless you like heart and soul know the right answer. And you have to be on the other side, because that's how you gain empathy and perspective and, take in other people's viewpoints. And I think just like as a department, as a major, as a group of professors, everyone did such an amazing job of like leading you to look at other perspectives, other viewpoints, other ways of thinking, why things are the way that they are. And I think for someone who, at the time, I wasn't that interested in writing per se outside of like academics and, but looking back on it, I can just see why that was so interesting to me. And as I write, why people do what they do and the things that motivate us and the different perspectives that we come from and the way that they influence us. That's what good writing is all about. You know, like good characters, compelling characters, they can't be static. They can't all think and feel the same. Mm-hmm. And so I think that major was probably almost just as good for someone who wants to be a writer as being an English major, especially if you are fairly fundamentally good at English in general. So yeah, definitely glad I majored in that. It was a little maybe out there, but you know, and then prison was a interesting experience too, and I'm glad I did that. So yeah.
And that what was the first thing you wrote that you remember? The fiction? Do you remember the first thing you wrote?
So I started doing actually poetry, a little bit of poetry, which I think I had always stayed away from because my mom writes poetry, and, you know, it just felt like...
You want your own thing.
Yeah, that can be her thing. So it was actually that, and just it was about depression and suicide, both of things which I struggled with as an early teen. And kind of my first exploration of just like really kind of approaching that head on. And it was actually, I was an RA at my college, a residential assistant in the dorms. And so we had to have these meetings every week with the resident director. And she wasn't a counselor, but I felt like it always kind of ended up like that, you know, like she was just someone that was really easy to talk to. And we were talking about, I guess, my growing up or something from early on in my life. And I've always, you know, it's like I grew up on a farm, had 2 loving parents, great siblings, like so many good things. And, you know, I've always said, you know, like, yes, growing up was wonderful. Everything was wonderful. But I was talking to her about when I was 13, and I was severely depressed. And for me, that I tend to have a lot of physical symptoms with my mental health swings and dips and all of that. So just severe joint pain and headaches and fatigue. And, you know, I ended up having to not play volleyball because I could hardly even walk upstairs. Like I can't. So all of these different things, and was just severely depressed and all of this stuff. And she was like, she said, you always say that your childhood was so wonderful, you know? And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, my parents were great, blah, 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 going on. And she was like, okay, but if you're like laying awake in the night, creating a plan to kill yourself, like how wonderful, like why could, like that doesn't sound wonderful. And she was the first one who kind of gave me this idea that like it's okay to have had wonderful parents and a wonderful place to live and a lot of really good things in your life and still say that was really hard for me. That was really bad. Like that just sucked. And it was rough. And you don't have to pretend that every moment was okay just because you wanted it to be okay. You can say that some things weren't okay, and that's okay. And I think some of that was me not necessarily having gone back and kind of actually dealt with that. And some of that was me wanting to protect other people, you know, not wanting my parents to feel guilty or bad, or, you know, like, I don't feel like I didn't have like a trauma event that like brought this on for me. I think it was just a combination of my personality, of hormones. You know, I was 13. That's kind of a crazy time anyways for especially, I think, young girls. And, you know, I think it was just all of these different factors and not really something that someone said or did. But it, like, for me, that's just what it was. And I think being able to say, yeah, that did, like, that was really bad, was like just kind of like release this wall in me. And I think maybe kind of motivated me towards doing writing that wasn't so formal and academic and was more personal about me and my life and some things that were hard. And so it's kind of a way of, I think, processing things that I had just kind of shoved away for a long time.
And you got it out in a creative way, a safe way.
Yes.
I'm sure it was a nice release.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
That's where it begins.
Very true. Yes.
All right. But then, did you major in teaching? Was that the next phase for you at this point?
Oh, yeah. So, majored in criminal justice with a minor in Bible and psychology. And yes.
Can I get a witness?
Yes.
In jail.
Yeah. And then I graduated in 3 years, so I just kind of blasted through. So I stayed, I rented a house with some friends for kind of that year. A lot of them were doing their 4th year, and then I was just there. So I did AmeriCorps for a year at a social services agency, thinking I was going to get my master's in social work, and then I was like, nope. This was an informative year. I am not getting a master's in social work. And then, so that's when I transitioned to the prison. So I moved to South Dakota, spent a year as a correctional officer in the women's prison. Then I got married. So I moved to a different town in South Dakota and did about 6 months as a juvenile correctional officer in a private juvenile facility. And then my husband got offered a job in Texas, just kind of out of the blue. We'd only been married a couple months, but it was like, we're young, we don't have kids. Why not move to Texas, right? Like, This seems like a good time. So we just picked up everything and moved to Texas. And kind of towards, as all this was happening, and I was in the juvenile facility, and I really liked working with kids, but I could see that the juvenile facility was going to burn me out. The juvenile facility, it was much more physically strenuous, and that there were more fights, more physical contact, more restraints, just more everything than there was at the prison. I think some of it being the juvenile facility, it's kids, so you have a number of them were coming off of drug and alcohol addictions. They have a lot of hurt and pain and abuse. They're kids, so the hormones, the emotions, the impulse control, it's all woo. So it was just a lot more going on there than, at a prison with adults. So I could just tell it was going to burn me out. And I had started looking at, okay, how long would it take if I went back to school and wanted to become a teacher. So I was looking into that already when my husband got offered the job and we moved to Texas. So I tried loss prevention, stopping shoplifters at Marshall's, a department store. Was not a big fan of it. It's very much the sort of job where it's like just dead, and then all of a sudden, like, here it is, it's happening, heart rate through the roof, boom, 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 and then, like, it's over. And I'm like, I don't think I'm like I don't like that, like nothing to 100. That's not me. And I just found it very like anxiety producing and stressful. But, you need a job. So I was doing that. And then that's when I decided, okay, I really want to teach. And a lot of southern states have alternative certification programs. They're not quite as popular up north, but I think the more and more states are struggling with teacher shortages. So they look for alternative ways. So I did a program, and it was a lengthy program. I did like 40 hours shadowing in the classroom and 300 hours of classwork and a 6-week course. Alternative certifications are not just like, I decided to be a teacher. You do a lot of work with those. So I went through that and started teaching, was that 2015 was my first year of teaching. So I was at a Title I urban middle school, and I did that for almost 4 years. I was teaching English. There's some really good things about teaching, and I wouldn't want to discourage someone from teaching. But there's also just a lot of struggles teaching.
Of course.
You know, and you're just dealing with a lot of pressure from a lot of different directions. You have administration, you have parents, you